The sharp crack of the slap echoed through the Galactic Council chamber as the human's hand impacted the Ventaxian king's gray, scaly face. Thousands of diplomats gasped as one, their shocked murmurs swelling to a roar of confusion and outrage. Moments before, King Xenos had stood at the podium, spouting vitriol and denouncing Earth as a primitive backwater, its people unfit for a place in the galactic community. Douglas Baker, humanity's appointed emissary, had listened with rising fury, his jaw clenched and eyes blazing, barely restraining himself as the arrogant Xenos spewed insult after insult. But when the reptilian tyrant called humans uncouth savage upstarts, who should be ground under the Ventaxian Empire's heel, Baker snapped. He surged to his feet, cutting through the assembly hall like a plasma bolt. Burly Ventaxian honor guards tensed but held back, not daring to intervene under the Galactic Council's jurisdiction. Baker stalked up the steps to the dais, fists balled at his sides. Xenos turned to sneer at him, beady black eyes glittering with contempt. The human said nothing. He simply reared back and unleashed the slap heard across 100 star systems. As Xenos reeled, Baker's voice boomed out, raw and defiant. Humanity will never bow to Ventaxian aggression. We see through your plotting, Xenos. This sham of a summit is just a ploy to fracture the Council and clear your path to conquer the frontier worlds. The king sputtered with rage, jabbing a clawed finger at Baker. Seize that primitive scum! I'll have his head for this affront. Ventaxian guards charged up the steps, plasma rifles at the ready. Baker vaulted off the dais and sprinted for the exit. Bolts of energy sizzled past him as he disappeared down a side corridor, Xenos' bellows of fury ringing in his ears. In that moment, Douglas Baker became the most wanted fugitive in the known universe, and he knew his people would pay the price for his rash defiance, as whispers of war swirled through the stunned Galactic Council. In the days following the infamous slap, the galaxy buzzed with feverish speculation. Pundits dissected the incident from every angle, debating what it meant for the future of human-Ventaxian relations. Some praised Baker's defiant stand against Xenos' bullying, while others decried it as a reckless provocation that could lead to war. On the Ventaxian homeworld, King Xenos seethed with scarcely controlled fury. He paced his throne room, his claws gouging deep furrows in the polished stone floor. The human's brazen disrespect could not go unanswered. Xenos summoned his most feared enforcer, the notorious warlord Kazrath. Kazrath strode into the throne room, his black armor gleaming under the harsh lights. He dropped to one knee before Xenos, bowing his head. What is your bidding, my king? Xenos fixed him with a baleful glare. I want the human found and eliminated. Assemble your best hunters. Scour every corner of the galaxy until Baker is dead at my feet. As you command, Kazrath rumbled. He rose and stalked from the chamber, already considering which of his assassins to deploy. Light years away, in a dingy maintenance tunnel deep within the Galactic Council space station, Douglas Baker huddled in the shadows. He had narrowly evaded the Ventaxian guards, but he knew his respite would be brief. He needed allies, and fast. Baker pulled out a battered comm device and keyed in a familiar frequency. Jax, it's Doug. I need your help. A gravelly voice crackled through the speaker. Well, if it isn't the galaxy's most wanted man, you sure know how to make an entrance, Doug. No time for jokes, Jax. Xenos will have every Ventaxian agent in the sector hunting me. I need an extraction, and I need it yesterday. There was a considering pause. All right, hang tight. I'm on my way. But you owe me for this one, buddy. You know I'm good for it. Just hurry. Baker clicked off the comm and slumped against the wall, exhaustion settling over him like a leaden cloak. He knew the path ahead would be perilous. He had made an enemy of the most powerful being in the galaxy. But he also knew he couldn't back down. Xenos' imperialist agenda threatened not just humanity, but every free species. Someone had to take a stand, even if it meant becoming a fugitive and forsaking any chance at a normal life. Baker pulled himself to his feet, squaring his shoulders. There would be time for rest later. For now, he had a tyrant to outmaneuver and a war to prevent, and he would need every scrap of his wits and courage to see it through. Hours later, a battered freighter scorched through the station's atmosphere, banking hard toward a remote auxiliary hangar bay. The ship settled to the deck with a hiss of hydraulics, and a motley crew of rogues and misfits spilled down the ramp. Jax sauntered over to where Baker waited in the shadows, a cocky grin splitting his grizzled face. "You're a sight for sore eyes, Doug, though I gotta say, the most wanted look suits you." Baker clasped his hand, managing a tired smile. "I knew I could count on you, Jax. Looks like you've put together quite a crew." Jax waved a hand at the assembled band. "The best in the business. We've got Zar on hacking, Grok for muscle, and Whisper for, well, let's just say the stealthy stuff." Baker nodded, eyeing the crew appraisingly. "Perfect. Because I've got a plan, but we're going to need every skill at our disposal to pull it off." He laid out his scheme to hijack the diplomatic shuttle and flee to the lawless frontier. It was a desperate gamble, but with Xenos' assassins closing in, they had precious few options. Jax rubbed his chin, considering. "It's risky as hell, but I'm in. Let's give these Ventaxian bastards a run for their money." They split into teams, Zara heading for the hangar control room, while Grok and Whisper took up guard positions. Baker and Jax crept toward the sleek shuttle, watchful for any sign of trouble. They had nearly reached the ramp when a plasma bolt sizzled past Baker's ear. He dove for cover, heart pounding. Kazarath's hunters had found them. All around the hangar, the shadows came alive with darting figures and flashes of weapons fire. Grok roared and charged into the fray, massive fists pummeling armor and bone. Whisper seemed to dance between the bolts, her mono-edged blades dealing death with every fluid motion. Baker and Jax leaped from crate to crate, laying down covering fire as they inched closer to the ramp. But the assassins were relentless, pouring through the hangar doors in a devastating barrage. Just as Baker felt certain they would be overwhelmed, the hangar lights cut out, plunging them into disorienting darkness. Zara's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Go! I've scrambled their systems, but it won't last long." Baker and Jax lunged up the ramp and into the shuttle cockpit, frantically firing up the engines. As the thrusters roared to life, Whisper appeared at the hatch in a swirl of black, Grok lumbering behind her. "Punch it!" Baker yelled, and Jax slammed the throttle forward. The shuttle shot out of the hangar like a missile, shredding through the containment field and into open space. For a moment, Baker dared to hope they had made a clean getaway, but his heart sank as a massive shape emerged from the inky void behind them. A Ventaxian warship, its weapon ports glowing an angry red as it bore down on their tiny craft. A deep dread settled in Baker's gut. He had known defying Xenos would carry a heavy price, but now, with the might of an empire arrayed against them, he began to grasp the true scope of the challenge ahead. Humanity's fate hung by a thread, and he was that thread, frayed and straining, the only thing standing between his people and the looming shadow of Ventaxian conquest. Baker glanced around the shuttle's cramped confines, taking in the grim, determined faces of his new comrades. They were all fugitives now, bound by necessity and a common enemy. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together, and somehow, against adversity, they would find a way to bring Xenos' schemes to light, or die trying. The Starfire's engines thrummed as Jax pulled back on the throttle, easing them out of hyperspace. A rust-colored orb filled the view screen, its surface a patchwork of ochre and burnt sienna. "Carrack," Jax announced, his voice gruff. "As lawless and unforgiving as they come." Baker leaned forward, studying the arid world. Perfect. No better place to disappear. They descended through the atmosphere, buffeted by swirling dust storms. The spaceport of Mos Darius sprawled before them, a hodgepodge of domed structures and ramshackle landing pads. Jax set the Starfire down on the outskirts, away from prying eyes. As the crew disembarked, the heat hit like a physical force. Sweat beaded on Baker's brow as he surveyed the bustling spaceport. Beings of every shape and size hurried past, a cacophony of alien languages filling the air. "Come on," Jax muttered, leading them toward a squat, dome-shaped building. "I know a place where we can get some answers." The cantina's interior was dim and smoky, filled with the low murmur of furtive conversations. Jax made his way to a shadowy booth in the back, where a hooded figure sat motionless. Shade, Jax said by way of greeting. We need information. The figure's head tilted slightly. Information is costly, Jax. What do you offer in return? Baker leaned in. How about the chance to stick it to King Xenos? A dry chuckle emanated from beneath the hood. Intriguing. Very well. I'll hear you out. Over the next hour, Shade revealed a trove of intel that made Baker's blood run cold. Xenos wasn't just posturing, he was preparing for all-out war on a massive scale. A vast armada, Shade whispered, assembled in secret along the frontier. Planet killers. Genetic abominations bred for combat. Xenos means to paint the stars red with blood. Baker's mind raced. They needed proof, something concrete to take back to the Galactic Council. He outlined a plan to infiltrate a Ventaxian military outpost, his words clipped and urgent. As they discussed logistics, movement caught Baker's eye. A cloaked figure glided through the cantina, heading straight for their table. Baker tensed, hand inching toward his concealed blaster. The figure threw back its hood, revealing a striking Ventaxian female. Her scales shimmered with an iridescent sheen, her eyes sharp and intelligent. Douglas Baker, she said, her voice low and melodious. I am Arya Kalen, daughter of King Xenos, and I want to help you bring my father to justice. Baker's companions bristled. Whisper's hand twitched toward a hidden blade. Jax growled, How do we know this isn't a trap? Arya met their suspicious glares unflinchingly. Because I've seen firsthand the atrocities my father is capable of. His ambition knows no bounds. He must be stopped for the sake of all sentient beings. Baker studied her, noting the fire in her eyes, the set of her jaw. His instincts, honed through years of diplomatic service, told him she was sincere. All right, he said, ignoring Jax's rumble of protest. What can you offer us? Arya's mandibles twitched in a Ventaxian smile. Access codes, security clearances, everything you need to infiltrate our most secure installations. Baker nodded, his mind already racing ahead to their next move. Then let's get to work. We have a tyrant to expose. As they left the cantina, the twin suns of Karak dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in fierce oranges and reds. Baker squinted against the glare, knowing that somewhere out there, Xenos' war machine was grinding into motion. Time was running out. The future of the cosmos hung in the balance, and Douglas Baker, unlikely fugitive and reluctant hero, found himself at the center of a brewing storm that threatened to consume everything in its path. Baker's eyes narrowed as he absorbed Arya's revelation. The daughter of King Xenos, here to aid their cause. It was almost too perfect, yet his instincts told him she spoke the truth. We need to move fast, Baker said, rising from the table. Shade, can you arrange transport off-world? The hooded figure nodded. I have a freighter leaving for Tarina Prime in 2 hours. It's not luxurious, but it'll get you there undetected. As they hurried through Mos Dara's winding streets, Baker outlined their next steps. Tarina Prime is key. If we can secure their mineral resources, we'll have a foundation to build on. Jax grunted. And how exactly do you plan to convince Governor Braxtrom? Man's as stubborn as a Krallian rock beast. With the truth, Baker replied, and a little help from our new friend. Arya's mandibles clicked. I can provide access codes to our military databases. Show Braxtrom the scale of my father's buildup. He'll have no choice but to see reason. The freighter creaked and groaned as it dropped out of hyperspace above Tarina Prime. Through the view screen, Baker saw a world of jagged mountains and yawning chasms, its surface scarred by centuries of mining. They touched down on the outskirts of Ironforge, the planet's sprawling capital. Towering refineries belched plumes of acrid smoke into the rust-colored sky. The streets teemed with a mix of burly miners and sharp-eyed merchants, all angling for their piece of Tarina's mineral wealth. Baker led the group toward the governor's compound, a fortress-like structure of stone and steel. At the gates, a pair of guards barred their path, plasma rifles held at the ready. State your business, one growled. Baker stepped forward. I'm Douglas Baker, here to see Governor Braxtrom on urgent diplomatic business. The guard's eyes widened in recognition. The human who slapped King Xenos? You've got some nerve showing up here. Then you know how important this must be, Baker pressed. Please, inform the governor we seek an audience. Minutes stretched into an hour as they waited, tension thick in the air. Finally, the gates creaked open. The governor will see you, the guard announced, but only you and one other. Baker nodded to Arya. Let's go. The rest of you, stay alert. If things go south, be ready to extract us. They were led through winding corridors to Brackstrom's office. The governor, a bear of a man with a thick beard and piercing blue eyes, scowled as they entered. So, the galaxy's most wanted man graces us with his presence, Brackstrom rumbled. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't turn you over to Xenos right now. Baker met his gaze steadily. Because Xenos plans to conquer the frontier, starting with Tarina Prime, and we have the proof. For the next hour, Baker and Arya laid out their case. They showed Brackstrom classified Ventaxian military reports, troop movements, weapons schematics. The governor's face grew increasingly grim as the evidence mounted. Even if I believe you, Brackstrom said finally, what do you expect me to do? We're miners, not soldiers. Join our alliance, Baker urged. Your our contacts. Together, we can build a force to rival Xenos' armada. Brackstrom stroked his beard, considering. It's a big risk. I'll need to consult with my advisors. Time is short, Arya interjected. My father's plans are already in motion. The governor's eyes narrowed. And why should I trust the word of Xenos' own flesh and blood? Because she's risking everything to stop him, Baker said softly, just like the rest of us. Brackstrom was silent for a long moment. Then he activated his comm unit. Prepare my shuttle. We're taking a little trip. Aboard the Starfire, Jax and the others corroborated Baker's story. Brackstrom paced the deck, his face etched with worry. If Xenos takes control, he'll seize our minds, enslave our people, the governor muttered. We can't let that happen. He turned to Baker, dedication hardening his features. All right, you've convinced me. Tarina Prime will join your alliance. Our ore will fuel your ships. Our tunnels will hide your troops. Baker clasped the governor's meaty hand. Thank you. This is just the beginning. As word of their success spread, other frontier worlds reached out. On Xerxes V, Baker negotiated with moisture farmers, securing vital water reserves. At Julon Station, he swayed the mercenary commander Daxa Finn with promises of profit and independence. With each new ally, their fledgling resistance grew stronger. But as Baker stood on the Starfire's bridge, watching the stars streak by, he knew the real test was yet to come. Somewhere out there, Xenos was marshaling his forces, and only by striking at the heart of the Ventaxian Empire could they hope to stop him. Baker's gaze drifted to Arya, working alongside Zara at a nearby console. Despite himself, he felt drawn to her courage, her willpower to right her father's wrongs. But he pushed the feelings aside. There would be time for such things later, if they survived what was to come. For now, they had a tyrant to dethrone and a galaxy to save. Baker squared his shoulders and turned back to the star map, plotting their next move in the dangerous game that lay ahead. The Starfire glided silently through the inky void, its hull reflecting the distant starlight. Baker stood at the command console, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface as he finalized their infiltration plan. We're approaching Ventaxian space, Jax announced, his hand steady on the controls. Stealth systems engaged. Baker nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Good. Everyone, gear up. We're going in hot. The crew dispersed to their stations, a palpable tension filling the air. Baker felt a presence at his side and turned to find Arya, her scales shimmering with nervous energy. Are you ready for this? He asked softly. Arya's mandibles clicked. To betray my father and everything I've ever known? I suppose I have to be. Baker placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the alien texture of her skin beneath his fingers. Your courage will save countless lives. They boarded the captured Ventaxian supply transport, its hold retrofitted to conceal their true cargo. As they approached the royal citadel, Baker's heart raced. Everything hinged on this moment. The transport docked without incident. Baker, now disguised in Ventaxian military garb, led his team through the winding corridors of the palace. Arya's access codes proved invaluable, opening doors that would have otherwise remained impenetrable. They reached the central computer vault, a cavernous chamber humming with raw data. Zara immediately set to work, her fingers flying across the security terminal. "I'm in," she whispered after several tense minutes. "Downloading the data core now." Baker allowed himself a moment of hope. Then the alarms blared. "We've been made!" Grok roared, hefting his massive weapon. The vault doors burst open, disgorging a flood of Ventaxian soldiers. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Baker's team took up defensive positions. Whisper became a blur of lethal grace, her blades flashing as she cut down foe after foe. Grok's thunderous laughter echoed off the metallic walls as he mowed down entire squads with sweeping fire. But the Ventaxians kept coming. "Download at 60%, Zara called out, her voice strained. Baker gritted his teeth, picking off targets with precision fire. They just needed to hold out a little longer. A new sound cut through the chaos, the distinctive whine of a high-powered energy weapon powering up. Baker's blood ran cold as he saw the towering figure striding through the smoke. Khazrath, Xenos' most feared enforcer, had arrived. The warlord's cybernetic eye glowed an angry red as he surveyed the scene. "Well, well," he growled. "What have we here?" His gaze fell on Arya, and his expression twisted into a mask of rage. "You!" he snarled. "Traitor!" Time seemed to slow. Baker saw the conflict play out across Arya's face. Duty, fear, dedication. In that moment, she made her choice. With a primal scream, Arya hurled herself at Khazrath. The warlord, caught off guard, stumbled back. "Go!" Arya shouted to Baker. "I'll hold him off!" Baker hesitated for a split second, then grabbed the now-completed data core. "Fall back," he ordered. "To the extraction point." As they fled, Baker cast one last glance over his shoulder. He saw Arya locked in desperate combat with Khazrath, buying them precious seconds with her sacrifice. They raced through the corridors, alarms blaring all around them. Jax's voice crackled over the comm. "I'm at the rendezvous point. You've got incoming." They burst out onto a landing platform just as the Starfire swooped in, ramp extended. Baker and his team leapt aboard, plasma bolts sizzling past them. As the ship rocketed away from the Ventaxian capital, Baker clutched the data core to his chest. They had what they came for, but at a terrible cost. In the ship's cramped communications bay, Baker worked feverishly. He transmitted the stolen data to every corner of the galaxy, to every news outlet and governing body he could think of. "It's done," he said, his voice hoarse. "The truth is out there. Now we just have to make them listen." He sent out one final transmission. Coordinates for an emergency summit on Ajira 7. It was time for the Galactic Council to face the music. As the Starfire streaked towards their next destination, Baker allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Arya's face flashed before his eyes, and he silently vowed that her sacrifice would not be in vain. The data core pulsed with secrets that could topple an empire, but the real battle, Baker knew, was just beginning. The Starfire dropped out of hyperspace, Ajira 7's swirling blue-green orb filling the view screen. Baker's fingers tightened on the console as he surveyed the planet's orbital defenses. "Looks like the Council's not taking any chances," Jax observed, noting the array of security satellites and patrol ships. "Can't blame them," Baker replied. "Xenos won't give up his empire without a fight." As they approached the spaceport, a crackling transmission filled the bridge. King Xenos' face appeared on the main screen, his eyes blazing with fury. "Citizens of the galaxy," the Ventaxian monarch snarled, "do not be deceived by these human terrorists and their fabricated lies." Baker furrowed his eyebrows as Xenos continued his diatribe, accusing Earth of fomenting war against the benevolent Ventaxian Empire. The king's words dripped with venom as he demanded Baker's immediate surrender for trial and execution. "Well," Grok rumbled, "that ought to make things interesting." The Starfire touched down amidst a sea of diplomatic vessels from across the galaxy. As Baker and his team disembarked, the tension in the air was palpable. Pro-Ventaxian and pro-Frontier factions lined the streets, hurling insults and accusations. Stay alert, Baker muttered. Xenos will have agents everywhere. They hadn't gone 100 meters when chaos erupted. A nearby view screen replayed Xenos' broadcast, and the crowd exploded into violence. Rioters clashed with local security forces, while Ventaxian stormtroopers pushed their way through the melee. In the confusion, Baker felt a sudden sharp pain in his side. He stumbled, realizing too late the danger. 3 shadowy figures converged on him, vibroblades glinting in the planet's ethereal light. But Jax was faster. The pilot's fist connected with the first assassin's jaw, sending him sprawling. Grok's massive form barreled into the second, while Whisper materialized from the shadows to dispatch the third with terrifying efficiency. So much for a warm welcome, Baker grunted, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. Inside the council chambers, the atmosphere crackled with barely contained hostility. Xenos' aides snarled and postured, while Baker's Frontier Alliance representatives laid out their evidence methodically. Governor Brackstrom's gravelly voice filled the chamber as he recounted Tarina Prime's subjugation. They came as partners, he growled, and left us stripped of our resources and our dignity. Commander Finn followed, her cybernetic eye pulsing as she detailed Ventaxian atrocities witnessed across a dozen worlds. With each testimony, Baker watched the council members' expressions shift from skepticism to horror. A commotion at the chamber's entrance drew all eyes. A tall, aristocratic Ventaxian strode in, flanked by armed guards. Baker recognized him from intelligence briefings. Zoran Rack, high-ranking member of Xenos' inner circle. Honorable Council, Rack's voice rang out. I come to you not as an agent of Xenos, but as one who can no longer stand silent in the face of his madness. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as Rack revealed his role in exposing Xenos' crimes. But it was his next revelation that sent ice through Baker's veins. A holographic projection flickered to life, showing a battered and bloodied Arya strapped to an interrogation chair. Kazarath loomed over her, energy whip crackling. For the crime of aiding these rebels, Kazarath's voice boomed, you will suffer as an example to all who defy the Empire. The recording cut off as Arya's agonized screams filled the chamber. Baker's hands clenched into fists, grief and rage warring within him. As the evidence mounted, Xenos' support crumbled. System after system denounced the Ventaxian Empire, pledging allegiance to Baker's Frontier Alliance. With sanctions and military intervention looming, Xenos finally capitulated. The terms were less than Baker had hoped for, exile instead of trial, but he recognized the need for pragmatism. As he affixed his signature to the ceasefire agreement, Baker felt the weight of countless lives on his shoulders. And now, he thought, surveying the changed galactic landscape, the real work begins. Baker's pen hovered over the document, his signature the final stroke in reshaping galactic politics. As he set it down, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. The past months had been a whirlwind of negotiations, planet hopping, and delicate peacekeeping efforts. Congratulations, Mr. President, Jax said, clapping him on the shoulder. How's it feel to run the whole damn galaxy? Baker managed a wry smile. Like I need a vacation, but there's work to be done. As if on cue, his comm device chirped. Baker's expression darkened as he scanned the incoming message. Trouble? Whisper asked, materializing from the shadows. Baker nodded grimly. Rogue Ventaxian warlords refusing to stand down, and it looks like we've got a big one. Gorax. Jax whistled low. Xenos' attack dog. That's going to be messy. Within hours, reports flooded in from across the frontier. The Apocalypse, Gorax's massive dreadnought, led a swarm of loyalist warships on a campaign of terror. Entire colonies fell silent as the warlord's forces swept through, leaving only ashes and slaves in their wake. In the war room of the newly christened Alliance headquarters, Baker pored over tactical displays with his advisors. Holographic projections showed the path of devastation carved by Gorax's fleet. We can't match him ship for ship, Admiral Kree, a grizzled Xerxian veteran, growled. Not with our forces spread so thin maintaining order. Baker's mind raced, weighing options. A full-scale war would shatter the fragile peace they'd worked so hard to achieve. But they couldn't stand idle while worlds burned. "We need to cut the head off the snake," Baker declared. "A surgical strike to take out Gorax himself." He turned to his core team, Jax, Grok, Whisper, and Zara. "I hate to ask this of you again, but—" Grok's rumbling laugh cut him off. "Save it, Baker. We're in." As they prepared to board the Starfire, a lithe figure melted out of the shadows. Ventaxian, but with an air of danger that set her apart from the aristocrats Baker had dealt with. "This is Vera," Whisper said, a note of respect in her usually emotionless voice. "Former Imperial assassin. She's got inside knowledge of Gorax's operation." Vera's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. And a score to settle. The Starfire cut through the inky void of deep space, its stealth systems straining against the apocalypse's sensor net. Baker watched from the bridge as Jax expertly maneuvered them into position. "Docking clamps engaged," Zara reported. "We're in." They moved swiftly through the labyrinthine corridors of the battle station. Vera's intelligence proved invaluable, guiding them past security choke points and avoiding patrols. But as they neared the inner sanctum, resistance stiffened. Cyborg super soldiers, more machine than man, emerged from alcoves. Shock troopers in gleaming armor poured from side passages. The ship's corridors became a battleground. Grok's massive frame filled entire hallways as he unleashed thunderous volleys. Whisper danced between foes, her blades finding weak points in armor with surgical precision. Zara's drones provided cover fire and disrupted enemy communications. Baker found himself back-to-back with Vera, her energy pistols humming in harmony with his own weapons. They fought their way through wave after wave of Gorax's elite guard. "Last security door," Vera hissed, her scales glistening with exertion. "Command deck is just beyond." As the massive doors slid open, Baker's blood ran cold. Gorax stood waiting, a cruel smile twisting his features. Beside him loomed a nightmarish device, pulsing with sickly energy. "Welcome," the warlord's voice boomed, "to the end of your pitiful alliance." Before Baker could react, the floor beneath them shimmered. A trap. He felt his muscles seize as a paralysis field took hold. Around him, his teammates collapsed. Gorax strode forward, savoring his victory. "Did you really think I wouldn't be prepared? That I would allow vermin like you to scurry about my ship unchecked?" A sickening crunch echoed through the chamber as Gorax's armored boot came down on Grok's outstretched hand. The Cronin's roar of pain sent shivers down Baker's spine. "You're too late," Gorax sneered, gesturing to the pulsing device. "The apocalypse carries weapons beyond your comprehension. Entire worlds will burn, and from the ashes a new Ventaxian empire will rise." Baker struggled against the paralysis field, his mind racing. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to fail now. But with his team incapacitated and Gorax's doomsday weapon primed, their options were rapidly dwindling. As Gorax gloated over his captives, Baker's gaze met Vera's. In that split second, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever came next, it would require sacrifice. The warlord's finger hovered over the activation switch, galaxies hanging in the balance. Balance. Time slowed to a crawl as Baker's eyes locked onto Gorax's finger, hovering mere millimeters from the activation switch. A thunderous roar shattered the moment. Grok, his face contorted in agony, summoned reserves of strength Baker hadn't known the Cronin possessed. The paralysis field flickered as Grok's cybernetic implants overloaded, sparks dancing across his massive frame. "For the Alliance," Grok growled, his voice thick with pain and perseverance. The explosion ripped through the command deck like a miniature supernova. Baker felt the searing heat wash over him as the paralysis field collapsed. His ears rang, vision blurred by smoke and debris. The deck lurched beneath his feet as klaxons blared to life. Through the haze, Baker saw the gaping wound in the hull where Grok had been standing. The void of space beckoned, atmosphere venting in a violent rush. Baker's lungs burned as he fought to draw breath in the rapidly thinning air. Gorax staggered, momentarily stunned by the blast. Baker seized his chance, launching himself at the warlord with desperate fury. They grappled on the tilting deck, alarms shrieking around them as the apocalypse shuddered. Baker's fist connected with Gorax's jaw, but the Ventaxian's armor absorbed most of the impact. Gorax retaliated, his augmented strength sending Baker sprawling. The human diplomat tasted blood as he scrambled to his feet, dodging a vicious kick that would have caved in his skull. "You've doomed us both," Gorax snarled, mandibles clicking in rage. Baker didn't waste breath on a reply. He feinted left, then dove right, slamming his shoulder into Gorax's midsection. The warlord stumbled back, dangerously close to the hull breach. For a moment, victory seemed within reach. Then Gorax's hand closed around Baker's throat. The Ventaxian's grip was like iron, cybernetic enhancements lending him inhuman strength. Spots danced in Baker's vision as his lungs screamed for oxygen. A familiar roar cut through the chaos. The Starfire, engines blazing, burst through the debris field outside the breach. Its weapons lit up the command deck, precise shots obliterating Gorax's doomsday device. The warlord's grip loosened in shock, giving Baker the opening he needed. He brought his knee up hard, driving it into Gorax's abdomen. As the Ventaxian doubled over, Baker delivered a vicious elbow strike to the back of his head. "Jax!" Baker shouted hoarsely, gesturing frantically to his fallen comrades. The Starfire maneuvered closer, its boarding ramp extending. Baker half-dragged, half-carried Whisper and Zara toward salvation. Vera limped behind him, covering their retreat with bursts of plasma fire. "Come on!" Jax yelled from the ship's entrance, laying down suppressing fire. Baker's lungs felt ready to burst as he hauled himself and his team aboard. The Starfire's hatch sealed with a hiss of pressurization. As atmosphere flooded the hold, Baker gasped in great lungfuls of sweet, recycled air. Through the viewports, he watched the apocalypse list in space, fires blooming across its hull. Gorax's flagship, once the terror of the frontier, now hung crippled and vulnerable. "We're not done yet," Baker rasped, struggling to his feet. "Get me to the bridge. It's time to end this." As Jax piloted them away from the dying behemoth, Baker's fingers flew across the comm panel. The Alliance fleet needed to strike now before Gorax could regroup. "All ships, this is President Baker," he transmitted. "The apocalypse is wounded. Engage at will. I repeat, engage at will." The response was immediate. Alliance cruisers dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons already primed. Gorax's loyalist armada scrambled to form a defensive perimeter, but the element of surprise was lost. Space lit up with the fury of battle. Energy beams lanced between capital ships as fighter squadrons clashed in swirling dogfights. Baker watched it unfold, his heart heavy with the weight of lives hanging in the balance. "We need to get back in there," he said, turning to Jax. "One final push to take out the reactor core." Jax nodded grimly. "You got it, boss. But how do you plan on getting past those defenses?" Baker's lips curved in a humorless smile. "The old-fashioned way. We go in hot and pray." As the Starfire banked toward the apocalypse, Baker strapped himself into the gunner's seat. His team was battered, but not beaten. They had come too far to falter now. "For Grok," Baker muttered as the battle station loomed larger in the viewport. "For Arya, for everyone we've lost." The Starfire plunged into the maelstrom, weapons blazing. Baker's world narrowed to the targeting reticle and the stream of data flooding his neural link. He pushed thoughts of exhaustion and grief aside, focusing on the task at hand. They would finish this fight no matter the consequences. Cost. The Starfire's hull groaned under the strain as Jax expertly wove through the chaos of battle. Baker's fingers flew across the weapons controls, picking off enemy fighters with surgical precision. "There!" Vera shouted, pointing to a flickering energy shield. "That's our way in." Jax nodded grimly, pushing the ship's engines to their limits. They screamed through the opening, alarms blaring as the Starfire's shields sparked against debris. Baker felt the familiar lurch of artificial gravity failing as they plunged into the apocalypse's cavernous reactor chamber. "Now or never," Baker muttered, slamming his hand down on the weapons release. The Starfire's payload streaked towards the pulsing heart of the battle station. For a breathless moment, time seemed to stretch. Then a blinding flash engulfed them. Baker's world turned to fire and noise. When his vision cleared, The vastness of space greeted him through a gaping wound in the Apocalypse's hull. The battle station's death throes sent shockwaves rippling through the nearby ships. Alliance vessels broke off their attack runs, retreating to a safe distance as secondary explosions tore through Gorax's flagship. "We did it," Zara whispered, her usual cynicism absent. Baker nodded, a heavy weariness settling over him. "Let's go home." 6 months later, Baker stood before a sea of expectant faces in the newly christened Alliance Senate chamber. The scars of war were still visible, makeshift repairs on damaged buildings, the haunted looks in many eyes. But there was hope, too, a fragile unity born from shared struggle. "Today we take the first step towards a truly unified galactic defense force," Baker began, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive amphitheater. "I am pleased to announce the appointment of Commander Daxa Finn as Supreme Admiral of the Alliance fleet." A chorus of cheers erupted, tinged with an undercurrent of muttering. Baker knew Finn was a controversial choice. Her ruthless efficiency during the war had earned her as many enemies as allies, but they needed her steel now more than ever. As applause faded, Baker continued, "We stand at a crossroads. The peace we've won is still new, still fragile. It will take all our strength, all our wisdom, to forge a lasting alliance from the ashes of tyranny." He outlined the challenges ahead, integrating advanced Ventaxian technology, mediating disputes between member worlds, addressing the refugee crisis. With each point, Baker could feel the weight of countless expectations pressing down upon him. Later, sequestered in his private office, Baker rubbed his temples, fighting off another headache. A gentle chime announced a visitor. "Enter," he called, straightening in his chair. Jack strode in, concern etched on his weathered features. "You look like hell, old friend." Baker managed a wan smile. "Charming as ever, Jax." "I'm serious," Jax pressed. "When's the last time you slept? Really slept?" Before Baker could deflect, his comm unit chirped. Another crisis demanding attention, another compromise to broker. He sighed, reaching for the device. Jax's hand shot out, grabbing Baker's wrist. "It can wait." "Can it?" Baker asked, a note of bitterness creeping into his voice. "There are a dozen pending trade disputes, reports of Ventaxian extremists stockpiling weapons on Novaria Prime, and don't even get me started on the corporate vultures circling for military contracts." "All the more reason you need rest," Jax insisted. "The Alliance needs you sharp." Baker's shoulders slumped. "I see her face, Jax, every time I close my eyes. Arya, she believed in this dream of a united galaxy. Was it worth the price?" Jax's expression softened. "She made her choice, Baker. We all did. Now we have to make it count." A sharp knock interrupted them. Whisper materialized from the shadows, her face grim. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. "The Perdition Syndicate. They've made contact." Baker's exhaustion vanished, replaced by a familiar tension. "What do they want?" "To make a deal," Whisper replied. "They're offering stability services in exchange for certain considerations." "Bribes," Baker spat. "They want to buy their way into power." Jax's hand went to his sidearm. "Say the word and I'll handle it, permanently." Baker held up a hand. "No, we do this by the book. Set up a meeting. It's time to show these vultures that the Alliance isn't for sale." As Whisper nodded and vanished, Baker turned to gaze out the window at the glittering expanse of the rebuilt capital. Somewhere out there, Kor Lazarin and his team were hunting the shadows, rooting out threats to the fragile peace. Baker pushed aside his unease at the methods they employed. Some compromises were necessary. "Come on," Jack said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Let's get some food in you before you face down the sharks." Baker nodded, allowing himself to be led from the office. The weight of governance pressed down upon him, but he straightened his shoulders. There was work to be done. 5 years passed in a blur of negotiations, compromises, and fragile alliances. Baker's days blended together, an endless stream of meetings and crisis management as he fought to hold the Galactic Alliance together. The weight of leadership etched new lines on his face, turned more of his hair gray. On the 5th anniversary of Gorax's defeat, Baker stood at the window of his office on Meridian, gazing out at the glittering spires of the capital. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, not turning from the view. "Mr. President," Whisper's voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "We have a situation." Baker's shoulders tensed. He knew that tone. "What is it?" "It's Commander Finn, sir. She's—" The rest of Whisper's words were drowned out by a deafening explosion. The floor bucked beneath Baker's feet as the window shattered, showering him with razor-sharp fragments. Alarms blared to life as smoke billowed into the room. "We need to move now," Whisper shouted, grabbing Baker's arm and dragging him towards the door. They burst into the corridor, choking on acrid smoke. The sounds of weapons fire echoed from nearby, growing closer with each passing second. "This way," Whisper hissed, pulling Baker down a side passage. "We have an extraction team en route." Baker's mind raced. "Finn, what's happening?" "Coup," Whisper replied tersely. "She's turned most of the special forces. We need to get you off-world." They emerged onto a landing pad where the familiar shape of the Starfire waited, engines thrumming. Jack stood at the base of the ramp, blaster in hand. "Come on," he shouted. "We don't have much time." Baker sprinted towards the ship, lungs burning. He was halfway there when a barrage of energy bolts rained down from above. The Starfire's hull sparked and smoked as it took hit after hit. "No!" Baker screamed as the ship's fuel cells ruptured. The explosion knocked him off his feet, searing heat washing over him. When his vision cleared, there was nothing left of the Starfire but twisted, burning wreckage. Jax was gone. Rough hands seized Baker, hauling him to his feet. Vera materialized from the shadows, her face grim. "We have to go, sir. Now." Numb with shock and grief, Baker allowed himself to be pulled into a waiting shuttle. As they rocketed away from the presidential palace, he watched Meridian's skyline erupt with explosions. The Galactic Alliance was tearing itself apart. Months passed in a haze of guerrilla strikes and desperate strategies. Baker's resistance fought tooth and nail against Finn's Alliance wardens, but the dream of a unified galaxy seemed further away with each passing day. Then came the day Zara stumbled into their hidden base, haunted and haggard. Her eyes met Baker's, brimming with guilt and tenacity. "I know how to stop her," Zara said, her voice hoarse, "but you're not going to like it." Baker listened in growing horror as Zara revealed the existence of the Purifier. As the full magnitude of Finn's madness became clear, he knew there was only one path forward. "Send out the call," Baker ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of lives yet to be lost. "Every ship, every world that still believes in what we stand for. It's time to take back what's ours."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.